Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine Middlegames series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we're taking a look at a lovely bit of King's Indian magic from Leela against Ruby-Chess in the TCEC Season 25 Division P. Well, we've already seen some King's Indian magic from Stockfish, from Komodo Dragon, and now Leela is getting involved here as well. Yeah, this was a rather interesting position, reached after 19 moves. Not a great King's Indian for black from the opening, as you'd expect in a TCEC opening, but well, Leela has to work out what to do next. In principle, White's done quite well. White swapped off the light squared bishops, which means that, well, all these light squares are somewhat sensitive, with black having pawns on the dark squares. Black's got the bishop, the dark squared bishop, active on this diagonal, so it cuts across the white position a little bit, but it's not really that great. White's also got the possibility of pushing with b4 just to expand on the queen side. So, in general, you know, a reasonable amount is going quite well. The only thing is obviously the white king side's just a little bit sensitive here, and in particular, this pawn on f3 is a little bit weak, and black will be able to play the move rook f8 to attack it. So, White's got to have something reasonable against that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, the move that I was really thinking about was the very obvious move b4 here, just to expand on the queen side. You know, I mean, that is the natural move. The interesting thing is that it's not really that clear for White here, because black has the nice resource takes, and then the move rook a3, hitting the knight on c3. Well, if you move the knight from c3, we're coming across and taking the pawn on f3. It's amazing how those pieces sort of focus together there. So yeah, I mean, for example, Leela against Stockfish, one of the games I ran, carried on bishop e1, but then there's the clever move knight b3 here, threatening knight d4, and after queen b2, hitting the 2. Then queen f6, hitting f3. It's just very, very sharp indeed. But basically, yeah, you know, this is getting a little bit too hot to handle for White. For example, knight g1 to defend the pawn. We go knight d4, queen a3, and knight takes f3 here, with plenty of counterplay for black. We're even going to come in with bishop e3 and threaten knight takes g1 here. So b4 very natural, but black's got all sorts of tactics to you know, to try and make that happen. Now you could sort of delay that a little bit. Play a move, for example, like rook f1 first, maybe with aiming to follow up with b4. You know, just get a bit more protection on the f3 pawn. There was also knight d1, which Leela played in one of my engine games, just with the idea of b4, again stepping out of the attack with rook a3. But what Leela did here was quite extraordinary, really quite amazing, but yeah, you know, also quite logical. And well, as soon as I saw it, I thought back to a previous example, which I'll show you. I've also looked at it on this channel at some depth. It's not quite the same, but similar sort of ideas. Yeah, I mean, you might want to stop the video here and try and guess what the plan that Leela came up with, because it is quite super. What Leela did simply was to take on c5, and I mean, really, this is not supposed to be ever a particularly good idea. I mean, after d takes c5, White's given up control of the dark squares, so this bishop, which was already cutting across the white position, seems to become even more dangerous. And the fact that you bring a d pawn onto c5 means that b4 should be much more difficult to achieve. So, you know, really, White's counterplay looks much more difficult to achieve. I mean, in general, you know, swapping off that dark squared bishop for a knight, going to this sort of structure, just removes all of White's attacking play and just condemns him really to a somewhat passive position. You know, seen it many, many times in King's Indians. You know, what a beginner's mistake. But Leela's plan is very, 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 very nice, and well, certainly the Leela at TCEC played it much more strongly than my Leela, which is a somewhat older version and not such impressive hardware. So knight a4 was the next move. What on earth is happening with knight a4? Well, black plays rook f8, we go rook f1, just defending the pawn, absorbing the black play very easily. That's one advantage, of course, of having moved the bishop from f2. And now Ruby played knight f6, and now Leela played knight b2. Now, what is the plan of knight b2? Still somewhat mysterious. Ruby played bishop g7, which I suppose kind of sets a little trap, because knight g5 looks very strong, hitting that rook on f7, which can't move. But actually, black's got knight takes d5 in this position, knight f7, and then knight c3. And well, it's quite funny. You're going to take this knight on b1, this rook on b1 rather, yeah, this knight on f7 is also kind of trapped. So yeah, you know, the knight on b1 is trapped, but the knight on f7 is trapped as well. And just notice actually that the reason this works is because white's last move, knight b2, unprotected the c3 square, so that makes knight d5 to c3 possible. So has Leela missed a trick? Well, I think the answer more is that Leela couldn't be bothered about the trick, because Leela is playing knight d3. And this is a very interesting idea here, because after knight d3, white actually has got two ideas here. White's got the threat of playing b4, breaking on the queen side like this, and also eventually of playing f4. And well, the big point of having played bishop takes c5 is that after d takes c5, well, black's control of e5 is really weakened, so white's going to play f4. If you go ef, I could play something like gf and then get in e5, and suddenly actually it looks like we're completely just wiping away that black center and shutting off all the black pieces behind it. It's incredible actually, but it's really, really strong, and black's really struggling to find any sort of answer to that. Now, I mean, there were various ideas where yeah, you know, black just played some moves, and then Leela just played b4 in my engine games, and this was very strong. But let's have a look at what Ruby played, because this was also quite remarkable to me. Because after knight d7, Leela played the move a4. Now, yeah, if you saw the earlier video on Stockfish against Eagle, then you saw a shocking move a4, and I found this one also quite as shocking, because, you know, I thought that the point was that white had two breaks, f4 and b4, and just with a4, Leela's just giving that one up, doesn't care. But basically, Leela thinks that f4, it's the same considerations in a way as Stockfish had against Eagle. Leela thinks that the counterplay on the king side is going to be really strong, and the counterplay on the queen side with b4 is not required. And why would you play the move a4 anyway? Well, the point is that if you go f4, then takes, and then b5 was the way of looking for counterplay. Takes knight b6, and black's got ideas like c4. There's also the idea of knight takes d5, exploiting this pin on the queen. There's also a4 followed by c4. Yeah, I mean, it's maybe not super for black, but black is in there fighting. So what Leela does here with the move a4, prophylaxis, just hold that that queen side, and then get ready to break in the king side and in the center with f4. So b6 was played by Ruby, just to hold that pawn on c5, and now f4, h6, and then rook h1. And well, I mean, the nice thing about this is that yeah, white's got plenty of ideas here. I mean, you could just play a move like knight f2 into g4, just attacking that one. You could play this rook to e1 just to support e4. You could play it to f1, for example, try and get in f5 somehow. Ruby played the move queen e8, and rook b e1 played. And now Ruby took on f4, which yeah, turned out to be probably a mistake, but yeah, tough to work out what to do. I mean, what Leela was trying was c6, and in actual fact, Stockfish was also trying this sometimes at an earlier stage, just to try and play c takes d5, sort of dilute that white queen side, and then try and get in something like b5, or if e takes d5, then e4, just to activate that bishop. That was not at all a stupid defense. Rook e7 is another idea, just trying to wait. But then, okay, we had a few ideas here. For example, knight f2 here, just looking for knight g4. And if you go h5 and rook h4, and after c6, yeah, slightly mysterious move from Stockfish here, takes. And threatening ideas like f5, for example, or even at some stage g4, and just break open that black king side. Just somehow, yeah, in a way, after bishop takes c5, really, this should have been, bishop takes c5 should have been the move that beginner's mistake that stopped white from having any sort of play on the queen side, and just basically condemned white to just passive waiting. Actually, it turned out to be completely different. A little bit of reordering of the pieces and bringing this knight round to d3, and it turns out that black's got nothing to do and that white's got all the play, and white can even afford just to give up any attempt of attacking the on the queen side, because the play on the king side is so strong. Well, Ruby couldn't deal with the pressure and took on f4, and now, well, I was only expecting g takes f4, which, I mean, looked very, very strong. I mean, you're just going to play e5, right? But Leela played it even more concretely, actually, just knight d takes f4, attacking the pawn on g6, and after rook e7, playing knight e6 here. And, well, you're actually just threatening to come in with knight f4, queen g4. Very, very strong. You're also hitting this pawn on c7. So Ruby took on e6, and now knight f4 and knight d5, knight e5, rook f1. And I mean, some of these positions for black, you can say that, yeah, I've got some control of the dark squares. I've got some outposts I could establish myself on. But losing the rooks is a big blow here. And, well, after queen d2, yeah, I mean, Leela was just, basically ready to go knight d5, bring the queen into d8 or the queen into d5, the rook into f1. It just wasn't enough, really. C takes d5, knight coming into b5 now as well, and well, Leela won this very, very comfortably. Just show you a few more moves. Knight a7 was quite nice, I thought, just looking to prepare a little move like e5, king d7, rook f4, king d6, king g2, g5, rook f3, just really waiting for black to collapse. I mean, if this bishop moves, the rook comes in, the knight can't move, and yeah, what else is black going to do? If king d7, some move like e5 at some stage is going to be very dangerous. So, well, Ruby played c4. I mean, I tell you, I wouldn't fancy, dealing with this in a blitz finish, but in actual fairness, it's pretty good. The one thing, Ruby managed to create this sort of counterplay, where, as a human player, you're looking and saying, oh my God, what's happening? But the engine evaluation of plus 12 or 13 sort of belies it all. Rook h1, g6, and now king f4. And, well, this rook is going to deal with the a-pawn, and this king is going to deal with the knight. You're not going to be able to stop the g-pawn, and also stop the g-pawn. And here a nice little tactic, undermining the knight with b6, c6, king d6, and Ruby soon resigned. I mean, I was quite amazed by that game. I mean, yeah, it's just lovely, seeing, moves that you would just condemn, just intuitively as a beginner's move, as totally wrong. Giving up that dark squared bishop, weakening all your dark squares in the king side, giving black a structure on the queen side that's well known, and often used to try and stop white from getting the counterplay on the queen side, which is the only thing that white has got. And instead, Leela just shows that actually the whole thing is all about counterplay on the king side, and that this move d takes c5 has weakened black's control of the e5 square of the centre, and that white can mine that centre with f4. What I wanted to show you actually was the game that it reminded me of, and it's actually elsewhere on this channel. It's the game Leela against DivP. And well, I went into it at some depth because there were two things that were quite amazing. DivP, Leela was white, DivP was black, and this move a5 was played, to attack the pawn on b4, and the automatic human reaction was a3, but Leela played the astonishing move b5. With the idea that I mean, you're giving up this c5 square, which looks like the complete end of your queenside ambitions. But well, Leela had seen much deeper. First of all, one of Leela's ideas was, if black hadn't played the knight to d7, was to play the move c5. For example, well, just let's have a little rook e8, a4, and bishop f8, for example. A move like c5 here, for example. If you go b takes c5, then we just get our knight round to c4, and you can't hold this a5 pawn. If you go d takes c5, well, I do something pretty much the same, really. I just play this knight round to c4, I play f4, and just like in this game, Leela against RubiChess, you're missing a pawn to defend the pawn on e5, so you have to lose that one, and then the whole white pawns just career through the centre. But it was even more subtle than that, because after knight d7, it looks like black's just blockaded there. But again, Leela just went for this incredible move, bishop c5. After d takes c5, f4, analyse this in depth in the video, you play knight f3, you get rid of this e5 pawn. And after b takes c5, Leela just played the rook over to a3, and then just played queen c3 and won this pawn. And then afterwards, just move this pawn all the way up the board. Simple, but just, something that you would... move 14, you would have said this is the move of a total beginner, an engine that doesn't understand pawn structures. But actually, it's really just demonstrating incredibly advanced understanding. And I think that this was, at the time anyway, this was really a Leela special. And I've noticed, in Game Changer, it wasn't as extreme as this, but Alpha Zero was, whenever it saw, this sort of pawn structure, Alpha Zero was very keen on playing a move like b5 and, really targeting that square on c6. Quite a few nice games where a big piece landed on c6, and well, there's a game that I played against the English international master Andrew Horton, where I played a very similar concept, really modelling myself on Alpha Zero. It's in Silicon Road Chess Improvement, and it's very, very interesting. But that's the game that this concept of Leela's really made me think of. Engines like Leela really make you think again very often about pawn structures and about, what is a winning pawn structure, and, all these things that I learned as a child, are they always good, or, are there exceptions, or are they just plain wrong, and this was a really wonderful example. I have to say, between Stockfish's plan of starting a queenside attack in the King's Indian like this with a4, Komodo's idea of playing king h2, rook h1, king g1, and then Leela's bishop takes c5. These are three prime examples of amazing positional play. I think all of which, really, before seeing these games, I would have just dismissed them as, wrong beginners' ideas. So, well, I'm still learning a lot. So, I really hope you are too from these games. But there we are. I hope you enjoyed that. If you like all these videos, please, why not give a like, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, take a look at my new books, Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, Reengineering the Chess Classics, and as always, The Eternal Game Changer, or even Study Chess with Matthew Sadler, which is also a very nice book, I have to say. Read it again. I even liked it still myself. So there we are. But otherwise, thanks very much for watching. Keep the comments coming, and hope to see you at the next videos. Thanks for watching.